Now, I was going to read from the script in regards to thanking you, John, but I actually wanted to say this from the heart. I couldn't sleep last night because I was so nervous about presenting. And I didn't want to let ANZ down. I didn't want to let my fellow autistic people down. But after seeing Joe and you up here absolutely kill it on stage, that was truly inspiring, and I really want to thank you. Also, the fact you love Tim Tams is amazing, and someone should tell catering to get Tim Tams. It's wonderful to be sharing in this event today. My name is Alan Bryce. I am a cybersecurity analyst with DXC and as part of the ANZ Spectrum program. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to introduce our second keynote speaker for Autism at Work Summit 2019. Dr. Lawrence Fung, I hope I'm not butchering that name, is a clinical analyst professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Stanford University. He received his Bachelor of Science and Honours from the University of California at Berkeley, Masters of Science and Engineering from Johns Hopkins University, and Doctor of Philosophy from Cornell University, and a Doctor of Medicine from George Washington University. Dr. Fung completed his general psychiatry residency, child and adolescent psychology fellowship, and postdoctoral research fellowship at Stanford University. Dr. Fung is the director of the Stanford Neurodiversity Project. In addition to his roles as a physician, a researcher, and a teacher, Dr. Fung is the father of a neurodiverse teenager with ASD, from whom he receives much inspiration and motivation to make change in the field of autism. I encourage you to learn more about Dr. Fung and his bio. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Fung, who has traveled all the way from the USA to share with us today.
Can you hear me? Okay. First of all, just want to thank Michael Fieldhouse from DXC Technology and Andrew Eddy from Untapped for inviting me to speak with you today, and thank you for NAB and Autism CRC for sponsoring this event. It's quite a privilege. Australia, in many ways, I think you're really ahead of us. As John just told you about, you've done a lot of really great things, including it's really making sense for everyone to vote, right? But in the US, it's not the case. So you are doing a lot of great things, and DXC Technology and ANZ and NAB have been doing really phenomenal job, and a lot of individuals on the autism spectrum got a chance to really show what they can do because of what they have started. And I really hope that many of you in Australia can continue with this kind of work. This can really make a big difference, and do come to the United States to share with us the success stories, because we need many more. So today I'm going to talk about neurodiversity, and I'm going to talk about some examples that we are trying to implement at Stanford. So what is neurodiversity? I think I'm just going to move on to the next one, and I really like to make sure that I don't go over time, so I'm going to make myself observe the timer. So what is neurodiversity? So neurodiversity, according to what we would like to define as, is really about acknowledging that there's a difference in brain function and behavior as part of the normal variation of the human population. So neurodiversity does not equate autism. is really about differences. So just like what John was saying, in 10 years, maybe he's not going to talk about, he's not going to talk here. And I hope that he's not going to talk here, or I'm not going to talk here, because we all acknowledge neurodiversity in 10, 15 years. And we would acknowledge that all of us have differences, and all of us can be neurodiverse too. And I'll tell you more about the strengths-based approach of neurodiversity. And this may be one way of discovering strengths of neurodiverse individuals, including individuals with autism, but also for many of us, not only for the small part of the population. So most of us know about the bell-shaped curve. So when you are thinking about any traits like height or weight or whatever, there's always a distribution, and most people are considered as normal, and that's the green area in the middle. So at 50, right down or at the center, this is considered as average. And when you're in the yellow zone, you're kind of outside the normal range a little bit. When you're in the red zone, you're either really, really tall or really, really short. So I'm just going to use IQ for a second as an illustration. So 100 is at the middle, right? So average IQ for the general population is 100. And when you have an IQ of 115, good for you. You're one standard deviation above average. That's pretty good. 130, you're considered pretty smart. You're probably valedictorian in your class or something. And if you're at 3 standard deviations, you're basically a genius. However, there are also people that have intellectual disability. With the IQ tests, they are going to have a lower number in their IQ. So anything below 70 would be considered as intellectual disability. That's kind of the medical definition. So so what I want to show you is that the last slide was really telling you about IQ, and it's really only one measure. It's an assessment. It's not telling you everything about one person's strengths. So this person, Professor Howard Gardner at Harvard University, has talked about multiple intelligences for a number of years. And basically, the idea is that there are more than just the IQ testing that we need to look at. So in addition to the visual spatial function, the verbal linguistic function, the logical mathematical function, those are the ones that we get from IQ. There are also other areas like musical, rhythmic, bodily kinesthetic, naturalistic, intrapersonal, and interpersonal dimensions that can be assessed. So if we are going to be able to look at a wider range of the intelligences, we're not going to miss out the opportunity for identifying the strengths of really brilliant minds. So one illustration using this concept is to look at Einstein's profile. So he played the violin, so I'll grant him maybe 1 standard deviation above the average. Visual spatial, he is really, really remarkable, so probably considered as a genius on that dimension. Verbal linguistic, however, what do you think? Get a little louder, I cannot hear. I'm getting old. So,
2 standards below?
well, not quite, but definitely below average a little bit. He didn't actually start speaking until 5 years old. So his elementary school teachers would think that he is not going to go to college, he's not going to have like a really brilliant trajectory. But look at him, he is one of the most remarkable person we ever know. He really changed the world because of how he thinks and because he thinks differently. And when we look at logical mathematical, he's really just way out there. I think probably like 10 standard deviations above. And then naturalistic, he's probably average. Intrapersonal, not so good. And we know that he does not really articulate about himself very well, and he doesn't really get along with people very well either. Bodily kinesthetic, he's at least, sorry, I'm going to go back one. He's at least average because he is able to ride a bicycle at least. So what this profile is telling you is that when we are remembering someone, we can actually focus on the person's strengths. I think most people in this room will remember him as one of the most brilliant physicists or scientists ever, and he probably will stay as one of the top 10 even for 1,000 years. And we don't talk about his lack of interpersonal skills because he changed the world because of something else. So what if we can focus on the something else? And here's another example, and if you can hit the video. It's about 3 minutes. So there's a little bit more after this, but I'll just describe to you what is supposed to show. So Stephen Wiltshire went up to the sky with a helicopter, and then he looked at the city, and then basically drew the city on a 30-feet portrait in great detail in front of 10,000 people. So he has photographic memory like no other, and it doesn't really escape. He remembers all of that detail within like 15 minutes, and then draw the entire city within like a week. You don't really see that kind of talent like every day. This is really unusual abilities. And Stephen Wiltshire has autism. So his profile would probably be like this. Visual spatial is like 10 standard deviations above everybody. And his verbal ability is not so good. Logical mathematical, pretty good as well. And naturalistic, probably average. Intrapersonal is not as good. Interpersonal is also not as good. Body kinesthetic is average. So what we can say is that it's just another example of really about looking at someone's strengths and try to get a person to develop his or her strengths to be able to make the world better. This person will not be remembered as someone that is very eloquent, but he is really someone that really can draw the world to a way that no one can ever express the same way. And this person is not, at least he chose not to get into the tech field. So a lot of the examples that we are seeing in the Autism at Work initiatives are really about tech. But I'm just telling you that there's also opportunity for some other companies. If you are representing a company that is not really high tech, there is also opportunity because there are individuals out there that have unusual talents, and if you are able to find their strengths, they can be the best people to work for your company. So this slide is to illustrate that variability in the different kinds of abilities that people have. So say, for example, the first row are mainly physicists and mathematicians, and then there are biologists here. Here's Charles Darwin. We cannot really diagnose him these days, but because we need to assess the person in person in order to make it valid. So we can only suspect that he is on the spectrum. And some others too. So here's Lewis Carroll, and he's Andy Warhol, and some others in the entertainment industry. So you can see that it's a wide range of individuals that have very high abilities in their own right, and it can be possible that they can be one of your organization's contributors if there is a way to find their strengths and develop them. So very quickly about autism, and then I'll move on to something called the strength-based model of neurodiversity. So autism has several diagnostic criteria, and the first three are about social communication. So the first is about reciprocal communication. The second is about nonverbal communication. The third is about making friends. So these are the issues that they often face. And there are also other criteria that would be usually included in individuals with autism. And they include sensory abnormalities, deep interests or restricted interests, cognitive inflexibility, or we call it insistence to sameness, and also stereotype behaviors. So these are the criteria that are being used to label what autism is. However, depending on the context, someone who has autism can show the behavior as perseveration, but depending on the context, it can be looked at as persistence. So someone just never gives up and solve the problem for you. They are oftentimes having problem with seeing the big picture, but when when the solution lies in the details, like a lot of the tech industry really solve problems because you need the details, they are the right people to solve the problem for you. They, a lot of the time, have few interests, but because of that, they really get to such depth that no one would care about. And sometimes they may have problem with perspective taking, but they are also, because of the same characteristic, they are very concrete and honest. Social interactions are really not their strong suit, but they are extremely loyal. So when you're looking at these contrasts, they are all about the same characteristic of autism. But on the left-hand side, they are all strengths. On the right-hand side, they are challenges. So basically, if we are able to put the people with autism in the right place for the right reasons, their characteristics are actually strengths and not challenges. So neurodiversity is basically a competitive advantage because of that. The strength-based model is very different from the disability model. So as a medical doctor, I have to use these disorders in order to satisfy my bosses. Otherwise, I would get fired. So this is really the medical description of what we can understand each other in the medical profession. However, that's very limiting because we cannot really look at the other aspects that would define the strengths of individuals on the spectrum, like hyperfocus, attention to details, deep interests, excellent fund of knowledge, determination, visual thinking, creativity, etc. So if we are looking at the strength-based model and figure out how to operationalize it, there are a few concepts that I would like to bring to you. So the first is, I'm going to talk about each of those in a little bit more detail. But basically, just remember positive psychology, positive psychiatry, and the Chickering's 7 vectors of development. And we also want to emphasize that neurodiverse conditions are conditions, and we don't want to call them disorders unless I need to write in my medical report. Then I'll have to write something that my colleagues understand. We need to acknowledge challenges, but not. We don't want to call them deficits, because all of us have challenges, and depending on the context, we can actually make things better. But we don't want to blindside ourselves and say there are no challenges. There are definitely challenges. We want to apply the strength space model across the entire spectrum, not only for the top 1% of the spectrum. So what is positive psychology? So these two people, Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, are the founding fathers of positive psychology. They published this paper just about 20 years ago, and they talk about well-being, contentment, satisfaction as the core of the positive psychology. Flow is basically the immersion of oneself in an experience and get happiness and satisfaction out of it. And they emphasize hope and optimism. And this is a model that can actually be implemented very, very effectively by a lot of psychologists if they choose to. And there are also courses for people to take in order to learn about positive psychology. And because of its nice spin and the right thing to do, this paper was cited 16,800 times at least a couple of days ago when I checked. My best work was 350 times. So I have a lot to catch up. So because of the nice framing of positive psychology, there are many people that are trying to define positive psychology in the last 20 years. And basically, there are three major themes. And if you are going to kind of remember a few words, it will be strengths, interests, satisfaction, and growth. So if you are going to be able to make people on the spectrum to experience this, you're doing the right thing. And I'm a psychiatrist, and fortunately or unfortunately, I'm traditionally trained. So traditionally trained psychiatrists learn how to figure out what the problems are, so that's the pathology. But positive psychiatry is really what we are trying to really develop here. And what we want to do is to emphasize positive attributes and strengths. And we want to focus on protective factors and preventive measures instead of risk factors. We want to increase the well-being and growth instead of just symptom relief by using medications or psychotherapies. In contrast, we use psychoeducational interventions in order to enhance positive attributes of individuals on the spectrum. And this way, we are basically using a preventive approach that can have a long-lasting impact in all the individuals that are going through this positive psychiatry. And this has been largely ignored for a long time. So basically, we need positive psychology, positive psychiatry, and then we have this Chickering's 7 Vectors of Development. Chickering is also another professor at Harvard. I would want to say this person is from Stanford just to balance it out, but sooner or later there will be more Stanford to mention, hopefully. But I think we are a decent university, by the way. So we have basically 7 vectors here, and they are basically the developmental milestones that we need to focus on helping individuals on the spectrum. So the first is developing competence. The second is managing emotions. The third is moving through autonomy toward interdependence, not just independence, developing mature interpersonal relationships, establishing identity, and developing purpose and integrity. So when we are helping individuals on the spectrum, we are really basically looking at these 7 things and try to do also 3 things simultaneously. One thing is we need to figure out how to educate neurodiverse individuals to satisfy these developmental tasks. The second is to create an environment that is going to be conducive for these individuals to achieve these tasks. So that means in school, it will be to help the school officials to understand what their needs are, what the neurodiverse individuals' needs are, and create programs that are going to be helpful for them. And then the third thing that we are doing is to build programs that can help with the mental health delivery. And so all these 3 things are basically multiplied by 7 things. So basically we are doing 21 things at a time. And every one item, we are really articulate in trying to figure out exactly what we need to do. So an example is the Stanford Neurodiversity Project. The most important thing for this project, I would say, is to really change the culture. Without changing the culture to embrace neurodiversity, and if you put individuals on the spectrum to the workplace or the school, they're not going to do very well. Some of them may not even survive. So we are basically trying to establish a culture or a kind of small culture where the neurodiverse individuals are to make sure that they are going to succeed. So that means we need to educate a lot of people that are in the workplace and school. And after that, after the culture is all set, then we empower the neurodiverse individuals to really build their identity based on their strengths and not their diagnosis. And that can help them a long time, hopefully for the rest of their life. And if we do the things right, then we are going to be able to attract neurodiverse individuals to come to Stanford to study and work. And then we can train others to also participate in the project. And we want to disseminate this model locally, nationally, and even internationally. So this is one international attempt to disseminate this information. I have also gone to Moscow a couple months ago. So hopefully more and more people are going to be noticing that this is a possible approach. And ultimately, we want to maximize the potential of neurodiversity, not only for the people that are neurodiverse, but really for all of us. And you would agree with what I say in a little bit. So very quickly, we have a very good team that's working on this project. And we have some support from peer mentors that I'll tell you about, and the advisory committee. And we are anchoring our project in with 4 major themes. One is education, educating the public and neurodiverse individuals and stakeholders. And then we provide services, and that will include helping individuals with autism and other neuroconditions to find employment and also provide mental health support. And we work with companies, and we work with our legal scholars at Stanford on advocacy work, as well as other researchers to maximize our chance to really show that whatever we're doing is actually the right thing to do, because we have data to show you. So we have 3 major initiatives. The first is Neurodiversity Awareness and Education Initiative. The second is the Neurodiversity at Work and Wellness Initiative. And then the third is Independent Living Skills and Housing. Mainly, I'll talk about the first 2 initiatives. So Special Interest Group for Neurodiversity was established about a year and a half ago. Actually, we started conceptualizing that only 2 years ago when several of us at Stanford attended the Autism at Work Summit at SAP. At that time, we were really inspired by the stories that were told by SAP, and we already started hearing companies like DXC Technology really making a difference for people. It's not really just about doing something that's for social good, it's also meeting the bottom line of companies. They are actually getting more innovation out of this, so they are also very interested in this. So it's a win-win situation. So a year and a half ago, we thought the 5 of us will come to the first meeting, and that's it. And we have 23 people showing up. And a year and a half later, we have more than 250 people calling in to our monthly meeting to hear about a topic related to neurodiversity, whether or not it's about employment or student support or mental health. So if anybody is interested, and you're only 17 hours ahead of us. So our 4 o'clock meeting on Mondays is when it's at 9 o'clock. Your 9 o'clock in the morning. So let me know if you want to call in to the meeting. So here are some samples of the topics that we have in the last couple of years. So you can see that it's a big variety. And I also talk about neurodiversity all over campus. I told you about it's very important to change the culture before bringing the neurodiverse individuals into the workplace or the school. And we also establish a lot of alliances. This is not one group can do. It really requires a lot of collaborative work around the university. And we also have collaborations with many companies in order to make things work for not only for the companies, but also for the students. I think it's going to be a mutual benefit because I think Stanford also has very good students and they tend to be high performers. So we can send some to your companies if you like. And we also try to teach neurodiversity in order to help people understand neurodiversity. So a couple of quarters ago, I taught one class that's focused on introduction and advocacy. And then the second quarter is about using an approach called design thinking. To teach students how to build something useful for neurodiverse individuals. So here's the steps. So empathize, define, and then ideate, and then prototype, test, and then iteratively you get something good. So if you can show a few minutes of that video, this is the product from one of the groups.
My name is Isabel, and I'm a senior about to graduate, majoring in psychology with a specialization in health and development, and I am autistic. My freshman year, I was in Cedro, so it was Wilbur dining. We just had a table, like a long table that we sat out for meals. I mean, it wasn't compulsory, but the RAs, I don't know, I think that was their way of like community building, like we're going to sit at this table. It just means that there's a lot of people close to you because there's not a whole lot of space, and everyone's talking across, and there's just a lot of things that I would only go to like my dining hall because I didn't want to like even just like a new layout, like I would just kind of wander around and like be really overwhelmed. So I like do the same thing every day, like half my routine. But I felt like okay, I guess I should be social and talk to people maybe, even though I didn't like it. Pretty quickly I realized I was just going to sit in the corner by myself and eat my food and get out of there. Because of like sensory things, I can kind of get pushed into like a meltdown because I can't like escape the bad sensory input. I had a really bad interaction my freshman year during NSO with RAs who decided things were a crisis and everyone got less and less and less information, and then they couldn't make decisions, and so then no one listened to me, and I was like, this is ridiculous, you can't make decisions or listen to me. The biggest thing is the lack of information. Once you tell the people, this is what is likely to happen, this is what I need in those instances, here's how you can help me, here's what you do not do, everyone's been super on board with it, my RFs, everyone. But without that information, they're going to assume whatever they've been given in training. And so if they haven't been trained in anything related to neurodiversity, if someone's crying and biting their hands and is not responding to you verbally, that looks really scary, understandably. But I haven't had experience where I've like explained this to an RA and then had them not respond positively. Taking away some of the like imposition on the neurodiverse person to have that conversation, like it wasn't a comfortable experience for me. Like I was probably pretty like anxious, like sitting through this meeting, knowing like, okay, I'm gonna go talk to my RF, like, I had emailed him before and asked to like set a meeting. But if there's like more awareness about that, or even like RA is just saying like creating an environment where it's like, hey, if you have things you want to tell us, or fill out this form, and that can be a way to facilitate those conversations, especially if you don't realize that that might be a good thing to do ahead of time.
I was wondering if there were any like structured dorm activities that were helpful.
I pick and choose. Like if there is an activity that is not necessarily just social based, like there are other humans around. But trivia, you're just asking me a question and I'm like writing my own answers down. I don't really, there's not a whole crosstalk happening. But you still get that like social interaction and like laughing about things that you're end up like you accidentally have a conversation rather than the point of being a conversation. And so there are things that RAs are already doing. But I think like being really intentional about that is like a good thing to keep in mind.
My name is Anna Krakowski. I'm a senior majoring in English. I'm from New York. I suppose I have chronic pain and I have depression with psychotic symptoms. Also anxiety nonspecific and or PTSD.
I did at one point tell my RA, like at least one of my RAs, a lot of the things I was going through, and she tried to be helpful with like, she's like, I'm really sorry you're going through like physical and mental health challenges. I don't know entirely what the best protocol is for learning how to approach someone with trauma, because trauma can be so different for each person. But I think one thing that I did learn that I thought was useful that I learned in a class that I took was compassionate humility, where you're willing to put yourself out there and try and say something and ask questions and try and provide support in whatever way you think is right, but you're always willing to admit that you might be wrong about what's right at that moment. And it focuses a lot on being bolder and being willing to offer support, even if you realize it's the wrong way that you offered support in the first place. Just, it's good to offer that support. I do wish there had been more conversation about mental health in general around orientation or just openly in the dorm, or information about how to access mental health, programming around mental health, things like that.
You just heard from neurodivergent Stanford students with different experiences in the dorm and different perspectives on how the dorms could have created spaces where they could better thrive.
So this is a total of 10-minute video, and that's produced by one of the 3 groups in the design thinking class. And it's only a 10-week course. And we have students from the medical school, from business school, from graduate school who have sociology major. There are computer scientists, there are human biology undergraduate students. And they all bring in their knowledge. And it's not only that, that some of them actually are on the spectrum themselves. And they really bring a lot of information to the table. And more than that we are trying to make the environment better for neurodiverse Stanford students. This is kind of one of the main things that they are trying to do. And all of those students have first-hand experience on living in the dorm. And all the undergraduate students, I want to say is more than 90% of the students at Stanford at the undergraduate level, they live in the dormitory. So basically, the people that can influence the environment are going to make the experience a good or a bad one. So basically, because of that, the students have decided to tackle this project, and they basically want to make this available for the residence assistants, and many other people in the university will be able to benefit. So, so in this project, we are going to have a lot of these deliverables, including these videos, and there are students working on how to enhance accommodations within the university. And there are also another group of students that work on the performance feedback in the workplace. So basically, the students have a lot of really brilliant ideas that they are really cranking ideas to really solve very important problems that we are trying to focus on. So the Neurodiverse Student Support Program is the biggest program that we are trying to implement. It has many components. There's 3 components: transition, independent living skills, and social life, that are supported by the peer mentors. And there are also other areas like accommodations and learning, as well as career development support, mental health support, that are all provided either in conjunction with another group like Office of Accessible Education for Accommodation Support, or the Career Center for the Career Development Support. And I'm the person that directs the Adult Neurodevelopment Clinic. So we work with the rest of the team to really enhance the experience of Stanford students. So every student in our program would have an academic support circle with learning specialists, a career coach, or career mentor if they need these support. And it's going to be monitored by a Stanford Neurodiversity Project staff. And on the non-academic life circle, we can assign a personal counselor to them. We always have a peer mentor assigned to them. And we sometimes work with the family if they want us to. But because they're adults, we cannot make them. But sometimes the parents really have a lot of insight. And then the peers also can have a lot of influence in the experience of these neurodiverse individuals. And the most important thing that we are trying to do is to make sure that all the support that we are designing here are actually ongoing. So we are working with a company, Live Sherpa. Thanks, Michael, for the recommendation. And they're working with us on a platform that we can monitor, and not only monitor how the interactions are going, but also provide a lot of the crucial information that is needed for the interactions in a very usable format. So Neurodiversity at Work program, I'm kind of running out of time. I have 7 minutes or so to talk about. So basically what we are trying to do is to also use the strength-based model as the main, the strength-based model of neurodiversity as the main thing that anchor the program. And we want to empower the managers and teams to work with neurodiverse individuals. And this way we can increase the job readiness for neurodiverse individuals as well, and support the entire team throughout the entire employment cycle. So this is a very busy slide, but the main take-home message is that we're establishing a Stanford Neurodiverse Candidate Registry that will categorize different kinds of jobs categorize the candidates based on how ready they are for employment. And if they are not ready, then they would be encouraged to go through pre-employment training or some short-term internships. And for the Neurodiversity Job Bank, basically we're trying to collect a number of jobs that are basically most likely going to be for neurodiverse individuals, and then categorize them by their readiness in some ways. So say, for example, DXC technology is very, very much ahead of the curve. So most of the individuals on this in the company and most groups would be more ready than an average company that does not have a program, like the Dandelion program. So basically, we are trying to figure out who's the most ready and what jobs are the most ready, and then match them. Sorry. And then after that, we go through an accommodated interview process, and then over the offering when the offer is given to the candidate, we also help with the company on how to figure out what are the accommodations that may be helpful ahead of time. So basically, at various different stages, we try to walk away from the typical human resources process in order to help the team on various different ways, the awareness training and then the position consultation. We provide the best practice training to the teams. And then hiring and onboarding, we provide support. And even after onboarding, we have a 12-week training for the team, mainly to make sure that during the transition time, they are going to be supported. So just like the students, neurodiverse employees have two circles, one for the workplace and the other for the personal life support circle. And again, we are going to be having someone in the middle that would be monitoring what's going on so that the support is going to be sustained. So I told you about the first 12 weeks after onboarding. We basically provide consultation through didactics and also have the opportunities for the managers and the co-workers to ask questions during the time that they first work with the neurodiverse individuals. And very quickly, I run this adult neurodevelopment clinic. Basically, it's a clinic that's focused on delivering mental health care for adults with autism. And we have various different modalities of treatment. So I have just about 2 minutes left. What I want to tell you is that neurodiverse individuals offer so much to organizations if they are given a chance. So if you choose to, they would have another chance to contribute to your company and to the society. Neurodiverse individuals have specific challenges that can be overcome, but we basically need to provide the resources. The strengths-based model of neurodiversity incorporates positive psychology, positive psychiatry, and Chickering's 7 vectors of development. And finally, the Stanford Neurodiversity Project is designed to maximize the potential of neurodiversity by practicing the strength-based model of neurodiversity. So how can we work together to maximize the potential of neurodiversity? If you would like, send me an email and join the special interest group for neurodiversity. Let us know about your interest in neurodiversity. Let us know if neurodiverse individuals you know are looking for employment. I probably will hook you up with Andrew Eddy and Michael most likely, and introduce us to organizations interested in learning more about neurodiversity. Introduce us to organizations. Yeah, so that means I have 2 minutes left. Introduce us to organizations interested in hiring neurodiverse individuals, and especially if your company has an American branch, that I can work with a little bit more easily, then that's fine. Otherwise, if you're in Australia, I'll basically just tell Michael and Andrew. So that means you actually can just talk to them directly, right? So tell us how you want to be involved. I believe that this is really about culture change. It's not really about achieving one specific thing. We're trying to make the society better by acknowledging that people on the spectrum actually are strong at many things, and they actually contribute so much that your organization will benefit a lot. And by working together, we can make a difference to the neurodiverse community and beyond. So thank you for your attention. I think I probably have 1 minute left. If you have any questions, otherwise I'll just pass it on to Karen.